Just when I thought I'd met temptation for the final time, here we go again. I'm looking at me when I look at you straight in the eye, like an old friend.
Good morning and welcome to Songs Nobody Asked Me For. And if you're new to this, you're especially welcome, and do follow, like, subscribe, whatever it is that sits within the place that you're looking at this, really. This is a little introduction to, as you can see from the introduction of the podcast, another interview. Really excited, it's somebody I was really keen to speak to, who I kind of know around in the scene, but I wouldn't say I knew super well, but knew of him, met him many times, and it was really good to actually sit down and meet Rob, really. I've known him as Rob C forever. Rob C Force is kind of his music project, one of his music projects, and you'll hear him talk about his different projects and iterations. Really, again, you'll hear he's not a great guy for social media. He's got a Facebook site, and we'll reference that at the end, and I'll put the links to that as I do these things. In the intro, hopefully it'll be there. It'll be there in the outro, so that you can find him. Again, look for Rob C Force or Rob C Force. I think he is on Spotify. You can find some of his tracks. Really nice, and I've got one of those on the intro, really. The thing about Rob is that he's kind of part of the fabric of Plymouth's music scene, and has been for a really long time. And he's been around, and I'm going to be talking about, I think I may do it for the episode before, because I try to pace these out and talk a little bit about the Musicians Co-operative and my experience of that, organisation that are just attempting to network and link musicians around Plymouth, really, which is a really important and great function that they have. And I've asked Rob at the end of the interview about that, so you can hear that. I'm not going to say a lot else, because we did about 50 minutes. We could have talked forever. We're both people who like to talk, I think, and you'll feel that energy and buzz from the conversation, I think. But really enjoyed meeting with Rob, and really pleased about that. So do as I say, follow us. If you like the interview, put some comments. If you know Rob, sort of say hi. It's really good to sort of get that sort of feedback, really. Enjoy the interview, and I'll catch you all soon. Yeah, really excited to sit here with Rob, and it's a bit weird because we met about 2 weeks ago, and just to sort of say hello and catch up. And there was a bit of me was thinking, because we started chatting, didn't we?
Yeah, we probably should have recorded that one.
I was thinking, are we going to end up with absolutely nothing to say to each other? Or are we going? But we will.
I think I'm old enough to have forgotten everything that we said 2 weeks ago.
So this is Rob, and it's as you know now on the podcast, I've started to sort of meet with several musicians that I've known around for a while, but haven't really had a chance to talk to, and Rob's one of those, really.
Yeah.
And I've been really enjoying this process. And I suppose, Rob, for me, I've been starting really by being curious about people's upbringings and childhoods, and how music came along to you. And in particular, I've got this little idea about how people end up writing music and how people end up mainly doing covers, and becoming guitarists, So I was curious to know about your childhood experiences of music, influences, anything, how you ended up sort of getting into playing music, really.
Okay, well, I was quite lucky because I had 3 elder brothers, and the eldest one was 10 years older than me, and the middle one's about 7 or 8 years older, and the youngest of those 3 is 5 years. And particularly the 2 older ones were really, really influential, I would say, in the. Particularly my middle brother, he was a drummer, and he also played guitar, and he also wrote songs, or him and his mates kind of wrote songs. And so the first thing is I had like a really good record collection hanging around the house.
Right.
So, I was kind of listening to things like, sort of Bowie, and Genesis Live when Peter Gabriel was in the band and Phil Collins was still on the drums, and stuff like Roxy Music, and Mott the Hoople when I was about 9 probably. So and the first single I bought was All the Young Dudes, and I didn't actually the first album I bought was Aladdin Sane, and I didn't twig for quite a while that the guy who wrote All the Young Dudes was the same guy who pointed out of his TV screen on top of the pops and said, and I picked on you and Starman, which there's thousands and thousands of people who reference that point when Bowie played Starman on Top of the Pops with this blue acoustic guitar. I had to call someone and I picked on you, and he sort of, and everybody, lots of people went, he was pointing at me, and I think he was pointing at
I think he was pointing at you.
And so that was like things like that were like key moments. But I remember I used to come home from, I went to Whitley Junior School in Plymouth, and my brother used to have his drum kit set up in the front room, weirdly enough. I don't know what was going on. And I used to come home and kind of think, I'll have a little go on that, and I fancied myself. It's funny because I used to convince myself that I could drum along to Genesis Live. And if anybody knows that album, like a lot of it's in like 13/8 or Apocalypse 9/8 is one tune. So I'm not quite sure I did have it nailed. But that was kind of like the kind of seminal time for me of getting into music. And my brother also had like this sort of Gibson. It wasn't a Gibson Les Paul. It was quite a nice Les Paul kind of go top type thing. It was a copy, Columbus, I think it was made by, and I started fiddling around on that. But I never really, and I was kind of quite impressed about the fact that him and his mates kind of did their own songs. Yeah. And I even ended up learning a couple. And in my first band I was in, I was sort of playing covers of a cover of one of my brother's songs.
Oh, wow, right.
And I mean, part of that's because like, I was just really wasn't very good on the guitar, so they were like 3-chord. It was sort of almost like proto-punk, I would have thought, actually, because I imagine the song was written before the Pistols came along in '76. So I kind of got into that, and and I had this guitar which I got given when I was about 5 or 6, but it was just like a prop for me or something. It was just like this
wave around watching Top of the Pops.
Yeah, that's it. And thinking I'm a musician because I've got a guitar, but I didn't know anything. And then when I was about 14 or 15, I think I started learning a few chords and actually being able to like formulate a few tunes. And I was at a school in Plymouth, a school that's not there anymore, called Sutton High for Boys.
Oh, heard of it.
And my best mate at school, it's funny, I did a back-to-back gig with him over the weekend at a festival in Lou.
I was there.
You
played a couple of hours before you.
You played about 2 slots before us, and then after us, my friend Mike Isaac, who's now called Michael J. Bolton, was playing bass in the Diamond Geezers. He was doing a depth gig for them. And but me and Mike started. We used to go to this place called Hoddington Youth Club, which, if anybody knows Plymouth, you'll appreciate. These are all like the real posh parts of Plymouth. He says with his tongue in his cheek, Whitley, Hoddington, and
colourful parts.
Yes, and we used to rehearse in the youth club, and we did do things like Rebel. I remember learning the riff to Rebel, and playing that like over and over and over and over again, and to the point where Mike left the band, basically.
And hear that riff again.
Yeah, and then I think I kind of didn't really do much for a while, but I started writing songs, I think, when I was about 14 or 15. Okay. I mean, I think that obviously there's no internet in those days. No, and I didn't really have many people around me who could show me much stuff, like how to play certain songs. I might have had a couple of songbooks. I remember I had the songbook, the first Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album, the one with Breakdown and American Girl on it, and a few other, like a Bowie songbook maybe, and you kind of learn. But for some reason, I just wanted I'm not really sure what it was. I honestly think part of it was I just I didn't have a very good ear for learning other people's songs. So I thought, well, I'll write my own then.
It's funny because one of the things I talked about in an earlier podcast is, because I am a bit of a closet Genesis fan.
Yeah,
is that
I've got no problem with Genesis.
No. I'm with friends. That's why I said it.
I did go off them after Phil Collins. I love Phil Collins. I mean, I'm not knocking Phil Collins because he's my favourite, one of my favourite drummers.
Yeah.
I'm not that keen. I mean, In the Air Tonight, it's a fantastic song. There's a few,
great album,
but I thought they went. Genesis went off the ball when
more commercial, didn't they?
Yeah,
my theory is that in childhood, I was so trying to copy such complex songs that I decided I couldn't copy things, and I think it's some of the reason I went into original music. If I'd been into like Led Zeppelin or something, I probably would have been thinking, I really want to learn this guitar riff, and I'd have worked away at it. But I remember trying to learn Genesis, and I had some Genesis songbooks, and even they were really complicated. I couldn't even work out the chords. But I think when you said about trying to drum along to Genesis Live, and I was thinking, you're never going to get those timings. Well, so maybe if you're still into the music, it moves you into a different space. If you're trying to learn stuff you just can't learn, either you give up, or you start to think, there's something else I could do with this, or began to find slightly different chords from it, and things, I like that chord, or just the odd bit I could do. Really.
I think a key thing as well for me was when I was about sort of 13, 14, punk came along.
Yeah.
So you didn't really need to know. I mean, you could write a song with one chord shape pretty much.
Yeah. Have a go, couldn't you?
Yeah, and so I think that was probably. But even then, I was, I kind of like the Pistols and that. But I mean, I was really into people like Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson a bit later, who were kind of associated with the punk scene but weren't punks. And I mean, their tradition of songwriting really stems from, it's closer to people like Bowie and Bob Dylan probably than it is to the Sex Pistols. But they kind of utilised some of that energy, I think, and I kind of. Because I was sort of started learning a few Bowie songs and a few Bob Dylan and the Stones. I was starting out with a mate of mine called Nick, that we had a band in the 80s in Plymouth called Nine in the Neighbours. And we kind of learnt all that stuff, but it's like when we put our band together, it's like, well, we're just going to write our own tunes. Like, we're not going to, we did a couple of covers, we did a Talking Heads, we did Psycho Killer, we actually did Take Me to the River, which is an Al Green song, Talking Heads did it, but everything else we did was original, and I'd always had that kind of, the first kind of proper band I was in doing my own stuff was a band called Relay, and that was about half covers and half originals, and then we got more and more original stuff in, as I kind of went along. And I suppose it's like now I've got quite a lot of songs because I've accumulated them over the years, and a lot of them you throw away, don't even remember, and other ones kind of stay with you. So, so now I'm in the gig I did on Saturday where we shared the stage down at Lou Weekender. I played, it was a set of with my band Seaforce. We did a set of original tunes. We did one cover, which was a Frank Zappa song, and then the next day I played with my covers band, The Wireless, so that was all covers. Right. So, but I still kind of do a bit of both.
I found that an interesting, because I interviewed a guy called Sean who's in a band called Horse Divorce.
Oh yeah, I know them.
Yeah, it's a lovely guy, and he does a similar thing. So he's in two bands, and that's been an interesting. So for me, I've never done that, but I can see for many people like that's for him. It's a way of he goes and does something because he knows he's going to get a big audience. And then he does this other thing to be creative and to sort of and you've done that. Have you done that for a long time? So Rob Seaforce is your original music project, yeah?
I didn't really ever. I did, I learned, like I said, I learned a few covers when I was younger, and then I was in bands like Nine of the Neighbours, a band called Billy the Mountain. Then I moved to Bristol and hooked up with an old mate, Michael Rob, and we put a band together called Swang Party. All these bands were like original stuff, basically. And then I came back to Plymouth, and I got into I put a band together called Shag Off with, which was
remember that.
Yeah, that was with some fairly well-known people locally, known musicians, Katie Tokers, Pete Nichols, Bomber Harris, Sayakers, and that was again pretty much all 95% original material. And actually, it felt like back in the 90s, I think audiences were a bit more open to it maybe then. And then I kind of got into doing hip hop with a mate of mine called Milestone, which I really loved that stuff. I kind of got off the guitar and got in production. I was playing drums kind of live with the cohorts, as we were called. And then I kind of drifted out of music for quite a while. I did a degree actually. I want to say quite a while, probably about 3 or 4 years. And then I'll tell you this little story. I went to Greece, and there was this guy called Graham Solo. I was on the Greek island of Skiathos, and this guy Graham Solo was playing everywhere, and I thought, I'll go and see him, because he's a musician. So he kind of was set up in this bar, and he was doing things like, I remember he did come up and see me, make me smile. Oh yeah. And I was kind of sat there thinking, and he was all right, and I was thinking, I don't know if I could actually do this anymore. I don't really play much guitar, and I don't really know any songs like that. So funny enough, I came back from a holiday and I chucked in my job and decided to learn like 100 songs. I had this target of learning 100 songs, so I was thinking, right, I'm going to learn like at least one Bowie song, one Rolling Stones song, one song by the Beatles, one song by the Police, Elvis Costello, whatever, the Jam, just like, so that if anybody was ever at a gig and they say, could you play something by, I go, yeah, I've got one of those songs, and what I realised from it actually is, because I hadn't spent much time learning songs in the past, it was actually really useful to see how really great songs. Like if you take a song like Waterloo Sunset or something like that, you think, oh, that's interesting. You know, that sometimes though he's using the E minor, and then it might be an E7 because it's leading up to the A, or you know, and you think, oh right, yeah, you know,
Almost like learning the craft. Of
yeah,
to construct chords and put them together, and
yeah. I went a bit backwards on it. You know, I kind of
undid
tried it all
yourself
out.
to do it
Yeah,
again,
I did it
yeah.
all by trial and error for years, and then kind of learned as a result of learning a lot of songs. I kind of filtered that into my songwriting. And the one, I think the songwriter that really kind of inspired me to want to write lots of songs, or not lots of songs, but write good songs, was Tom Waits. So I really I got into Tom Waits kind of in the 80s, and then I kind of got out of lots of different. I used to, you know, I was really, I'm back into a lot of the people that for a long time I just didn't listen to. Say somebody like Tom Petty, or so. I used to love Tom Petty, and then I kind of, for 10, 15 years, I never really listened to anything like that. But I do always listen to Tom Waits, because he's sort of, it doesn't really seem to fit into any category other than it's Tom Waits, you know, a bit like Bowie really. He's sort of, Bowie's his own genre, you know, whatever he was.
Weirder and gravelier as he gets older.
And Tom Waits, you know, the great thing, and then I started learning some of his songs. I thought, oh, these songs are so well put together. And then, you know, then you learn songs from people like Jimmy Webb, or like the really great, like Tin Pan Alley type songwriters, or Carole King, Goffin and King songs. You know, the people who kind of wrote songs for a living and shouting them out. So that was all that kind of really filtered into me thinking, right, I'm just, you know, I've got more tools now or whatever that I can write songs with. So consequently, I still, you know, I was kind of looking at it the other day. I was kind of thinking about this interview and thinking, what, I reckon I write about probably 8 or 10 songs a year. So it doesn't seem like prolific to me, but over like the last 15 years when so what happened in about 20, there's a mate of mine actually, you know him. This is what happened. This is what I got back into songwriting, because I'd left it alone for a while. So I was going to the Acoustic Cafe downstairs in the Fortescue. Jimmy's a great mate of mine, you know. He would put me on. And then one day he said to me, oh, that's all very well, Rob, you're coming down here playing these covers, but you know, you could do that and you do it well, whatever. But what about some of your own songs? And I'm like, yeah, all right, mate. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll write one. And I wrote one called The Acoustic Cafe. It was about the Acoustic Cafe. Because, you know, like people say, if you don't know what to write about what you know. And what I knew about was this little scene in the basement of the Fortescue with Jimmy and Sarah and people like that. And all the people like yourself would come down. Lots of people came down to it and played. So I wrote a couple of tunes. I thought, oh yeah, you know, actually I could, you know, I can write all right. So, and then I did an album called Home Sweet Home, which had like 7 new songs in it and a couple of my older songs that I kind of resurrected. And then so that was about 2009, I think. What was that? 16 years ago. And then from then, I've kind of basically regarded myself as a songwriter. You know, it's kind of almost like, right, I'm going to identify now as a songwriter as opposed to, say, a guitar player. You know, so that's kind of, you know, coming from all the way back to what we talked about with brothers when I was about 9. 2009 was kind of like a turning point for me of like, and from then I've written every year. You know, I'll keep a folder full of stuff, and I've got, you know, probably 120, 130 songs that I wrote since about 2009. So,
and what's your process for that, Rob? I've met people who they write words, and then they write music, they get riffs, hooks, all sorts of. I mean, mine's quite varied in a sense, really.
Yeah, so is mine.
What's your experience of that?
Sometimes it comes from the lyrical point of view. Sometimes it might be a title. You know, sometimes the rhythm, you think that's a good title for a song, and then you think the rhythm of those words kind of dictates that maybe it's going to have a reggae feel or something like that, or a Latin type feel. So then you think, oh, right, okay. So then, you know, I've written a few songs like that where you're kind of singing this line around, you think, right, that's the notes, what I'm singing there. So, okay, and that could be those. And then other times you're just fiddling around on the guitar. You take the kind of, you know, that approach of like, I'm just fiddling around really, not thinking, trying to clear your head out. And then all of a sudden you think, oh, that's quite interesting. That way those 2 chords went together there, or that little riff or something. You know, so you might write it from the music upwards. Sometimes it's from the lyrics, sometimes it's from the music. sometimes, if you're really, really lucky, that everything falls into place at once. But you don't get many of those experiences.
No.
But every now and again, like Carole King used to say about "You Got a Friend," she was like, I didn't really have anything, and in 15 minutes I had that whole song, and I don't know where it came from because it's if anybody knows that song, they'll know it's a brilliant song.
It is.
You know.
That's so exciting, though, isn't it? It happens so rarely. It happened to me literally actually about a month ago.
Yeah.
And I could probably think it's 10 years since that happened to me before, and it's so exciting. Just write this song. You just think, I know what it's about.
Yeah.
I know what it's going to sound like. Very exciting.
Yeah, I think part of that maybe is if you've got your antenna up, your musical antenna, you're kind of waiting for things to beam into you almost.
Yeah.
And it's being able to kind of, somebody else there might have been a spark of an idea there that you thought I could run with that, but maybe on another day or another person wouldn't think, oh, that's worthy of writing a song about.
Well, it's almost like two things, because I was talking to a mate of mine, it's one of these other episodes called Pav, who's a guy I used to play with in London, and he writes songs, and he was saying what people don't appreciate is that actually songwriting is really hard.
Yeah.
And so people can get little riffs and hooks and that. So I kind of think it's a combination of the two. One is that you've got your antennae out, you're always looking and picking up stuff. But then mostly, unless you're really lucky with a song like that, you have to do the hard work.
Yeah.
And then it's about how do you build the structure in, and it can be really frustrating, and it can be sort of spend ages noodling around on something. And sometimes you do one, you spend hours on it, and it doesn't work. Or you just think, and in my case, you play it to the band, and they go, "Yeah, well, I'm not really into that," and so you move on.
There is that old cliche kind of like, if you have to work on it too hard, it probably isn't going to work. But at the same time, you can.
You get exceptions to that.
Yeah, you can craft songs. I've got, I'm a firm believer in like, there's no set way that I'd write,
Yeah.
Like I've just said, sometimes I do sit there and think, right, I'm going to write a song actually. I've got nothing to do this evening. Let's see if I can write a song. And then every now and again you get a decent one doing that. And the way, there's that kind of, it's like a scattergun approach, I suppose, isn't it? If you write enough songs, then hopefully you've got at least enough for a decent gig.
Yeah, I figure I take about 4 to the band, and maybe 2 of them. Maybe one of them we do. Sometimes 2 or 3 we do, but yeah, and they get really annoyed with me. Just like you were saying, you churn them out, and they'll just be getting used to the set. And I'll say, I've got these 2 new songs, and they'll go, oh, okay, we'll work on these new songs now.
Yeah, but I mean, I think like I say, there's no specific kind of way of doing it. But if you kind of convince yourself that you're a songwriter, then and that's what you do, then that's the what I was thinking about your antenna. Be it, you're always kind of thinking that's interesting. I was waiting for my partner the other day down at Brettonside, and I was just looking at the King's Head pub for some reason. I was meeting her outside there, and next thing you got your phone out, kind of speaking some ideas into the phone, thinking, I just had an idea for a song there. But other days I might have had that idea and thought, well, it's not worth making it.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but that quite a lot of time, lyrical ideas come from just observing things that are going on. Quite often, walking around Plymouth or on public transport, you just think there's something there that could be a lyrical idea. But obviously, the musical ideas tend to come when you're just fiddling around. When I'm mainly in my kitchen, I'll fiddle around on my guitar. And it's funny because sometimes you can go all evening of like playing. I'm always like, because I do quite a lot of different types of gigs. I do gigs doing all my own stuff and all covers. So quite often early in the week, I'm thinking, what gigs have I got this weekend? I better just get my guitar out and refresh myself on a few tunes, whatever they are. And you might do that for an hour or two, and then towards the end, you're just feeling around. And when you're just about to put the guitar away, you think, actually, that was quite a good idea. What I just did. And then next thing, I've got the phone out like we got here, and you're kind of videoing yourself playing it so you don't forget it.
Forgetting it, that's the hardest thing.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing. It's like obviously, if you're going to talk about songwriting, Paul McCartney and John Lennon are key figures in the history of modern songwriting, aren't they? And McCartney particularly McCartney, because he's lived longer, talks about it a lot now, and he was kind of going, well, our songs had to be catchy because we didn't really have any way of like recording them, so we had to remember them the next day. So you probably, I do things, recently I've actually learned to write music or charts out and sort of top lines, so that's quite handy. But back then they didn't have a phone, they probably didn't even have a cassette recorder, so you'd have to kind of they'd write songs and like probably play them about 50 times that night just to cement them, and then the next morning get up and think, let's make sure we haven't forgotten that song.
I talked on a previous podcast about that. Before I had a way of recording, I'd get a little idea, I'd be out, and if I didn't sing it repetitively for at least an hour,
Yeah.
I would never remember it. And then often I'd forget it, and I'd wake up in the morning, it'd either be just straight there again, or I'd have lost it forever. It's
Yeah.
kind of, you wonder how many great songs from the not from me, but from those great artists got lost through that, really.
Yeah.
I guess from the original stuff, we talked last time, I know, when we were catching up briefly, about some of the frustrations of trying to do original music out there, really. And you do both, and I suppose I wonder what you've noticed about that. Obviously you've been doing original music for a while now, but
I mean, I was pretty adamant in my probably 20s and 30s that I'm doing my own tunes or co-written with other people in the band that I was in, and that's what we do. And there did seem, particularly I thought in the 80s and the 90s, there seemed to be a bit more openness to that. Whereas these days, I'm be careful what I say here, or alienate them. But it's harder to get gigs doing your own. Let's just put it, it's harder to get, it may be I'm not good enough to get gigs doing my own stuff, but
no, it's not that. It's not that.
What I do quite a lot these days, and my line is, I've used this format quite a bit now. I will play solo gigs, and I'll basically explain that I'm going to play one of my own songs in a cover, and if you don't like my songs, wait one song and you might like the cover that I play. And that's the kind of line that I trot out.
We have to be so apologetic, don't we? It's kind of, I think, unfortunately, of course, nobody's seen my podcast because I'm so far ahead, but I literally did one 2 days ago. I was talking about the ecosystem of where we all do music.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason for the 80s and 90s thing, and that was how we listened to music.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I don't want to go over for people out there completely everything I talked about last time, but 60s to the 90s roughly, you've got this amazing songbook of pop and rock songs. It's the peak of that time, which is why there's so many cover bands, because there's music to copy. But also we used to, you and I were younger and we bought our Genesis Live album or whatever, you listened to it on LP, and the way you did that is you had to listen to the whole LP all the way through. So you were better tuned in your head to listening to new music.
And you could probably concentrate longer on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas now, and we all do it, I do it, I listen to it on Spotify. Oh, I don't like the second track of that album. Through it. Don't like that. So I think the reason, one of my theories on the reason why people could listen in the 80s and 90s, because they were listening to probably CDs by then, but less skipping. Whereas nowadays we're all got this short attention span. If we don't like something. So I understand the pubs, and that's why I don't think it's any problem saying you struggle to get original gigs. No. But the pubs and the venues, they're struggling because there's not the money, there's not the people coming out.
Hospitality's,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if someone walks into a pub and someone's, I know I always reference this song, someone's playing Money for Nothing, people are going to go, oh, I know this song, I know this. Whereas if they see Rob C. Force there, and they might come in and they might think, oh, I don't really know this, or because they're not used to, so they can skip the track as in go somewhere else or whatever. Yeah. So I think we're always fighting against that. And I think for you and I as older people, that's fine. But for some of the young bands coming through, it must be really difficult trying to sort of get out there and... There's places like,
I suppose in Plymouth, if we think locally, there's places like the Marina, the Nowhere, the Junction. They, the younger bands seem to be able to play their own stuff there. I think one thing that's changed, thinking about it, and it's funny because I was looking through some old magazines the other day, like local mags, and I was reminded of a gig at Home Park in 1987, and the band that headlined that, and they got about 100 people at the gig, was Black Sabbath.
Oh wow!
And before Ozzy died, if Black Sabbath had come and played Home Park a couple of years ago, they would have sold it out.
Yeah.
And the different, because these days the big, what they call the heritage band, those bands that usually probably have got one member. Possibly, actually, Black Sabbath had all the original members for their farewell gig.
One or two original members.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
For instance, I'm going to go and see 10cc next year, and it's only Graham Goldman that's left in the band. But I think back in the 80s, people were still looking for new music, but you can see now that the kind of market in like heritage acts. That those bands that were big, that are probably just doing their final tours now, there's actually a really big market for that.
Which I think is where the tribute bands come as well, because I've talked about that on here as well. They're something very different. Yeah. But I think, being able to recreate that experience of a tour or a particular person, and it's almost like watching a play or watching a film of somebody. Yeah. And that's there's a big market for that, and they can charge a lot of money for tickets, almost, 25 quid to go and see a
tribute band,
that
yeah.
isn't actually the original band.
No.
Whereas you and I would be lucky if we get anybody paying to come to a gig.
It's
But,
interesting because, like, talking going back to Genesis and Steve Hackett. I mean, I think that the singer he's got in his band now was in a Genesis tribute band.
I went to see them 2 years ago. It's Steve Hackett.
Yeah, was it good?
Amazing.
Yeah, I saw Hackett at Tavistock Wharf, but that gig wasn't so great. He was doing, but he does do. He does like the whole of whatever. He'll do the whole of Lamb I Stone on Broadway.
Yeah, he's into his Genesis stuff.
I would like to see that. That was good. The bits when he played a bit of some Genesis tunes. That's it. I mean, this is it. See, I'm falling into that trap of thinking.
We all do, and it's perfectly okay, isn't it? It's
He'll
okay
play-
to know what you like, and
He don't play like Dancing with the Moon at Night or something. Oh yeah, this is awesome. And actually, John Wetton came out and sang a tune. He used to be in King Crimson. And it's like, and then he would play some new stuff. You think, I'm not really into that too much. And that, so I'm
universal challenge. For
I'm
us
probably
all,
just as
isn't it?
guilty as the people who aren't. But I still personally, I still go and see. I don't. Perfectly honest, I hardly ever go and watch cover bands. It's funny because I was watching a couple of. We were booked sort of sandwiched between when Seaforce played at the Blue Weekender. They've got Diamond Geezers after, was all mates of mine, and Levens 4 before, all mates of mine. So I got to see those guys. It was great. I don't really, because I don't go out and see covers bands that much. I'd much rather go. I mean, I suppose some of the people I do go and see do play covers, but it's not, like if I go and see Vince Lee, I love watching Vince, and he plays some of his own stuff, but most of it you wouldn't know if it was a cover or not because it's quite obscure. And bands like Mad Dog as well, they play, they've got some great songs of their own, and they mix that up with like covers and but yeah, I don't tend to go to any of the venues that have covers bands all the time, partly because actually also it's like if you're gigging a lot you probably think I actually don't want to go to them. I mean, I would
the night off.
I'd have to do the thing these days of buying a ticket in order to make sure I go out, because if it gets to about 7 o'clock in the evening and I haven't got a ticket for something, and
You're not going to bother.
I'm thinking, can't be bothered.
But you gig a lot, don't you? I mean, I see you around everywhere, and
I
guess because you do the two sort of things that you do.
I mean, so I've still got outlets for playing original stuff, particularly in Plymouth. I play the Fortescue. I'm quite happy to, there's no, I don't feel any obligation to play covers there, but I will play a few covers. The Millbridge, I play a lot of my own stuff down there. The B-Bar and the Barbican Theatre, play a lot of my own stuff there. And there's some really good nights in places like Totnes, the Barrel House. Christian Mewison does his open mic Blackbird Collective thing. Go and play it, and then you think that's great because I think the problem is if you play a venue and people aren't really listening, they're not going to get your own material. You have to play places where people actually listen and not, because if you're playing covers, it can be really noisy in the venue, but some people go, they're just playing like whatever, Wichita Lineman, and I love that song, so they'll tune into it. But trying to get that across, I had a great gig the other week to 6 people in the B-Bar.
Oh, yeah, you said.
And
I love the
what was
B-Bar.
great about that is I get in the second set. I mean, quite often, I've been known to dig into the guitar a bit, but actually, I think by the end of the second set, I'm playing like this, and it's all really quiet, and I think everybody's really listening. There's only like a handful of people in there, but they're all really listening. You can tell your stories.
You just want people to listen, don't you?
Yeah. And that's kind of, that can be more satisfying than to playing to like 200 people who are all jumping around having a great time. I think the thing is, bottom line is, if you want to make money, you can play covers, and if you want to get satisfaction out of playing music, then probably play your play your own stuff.
True, really.
Yeah,
it's probably true. I mean, that experience was why I started this podcast, of playing an acoustic cafe where nobody was listening.
Yeah,
but I've put you onto the Tavistock acoustic. It's wonderful. Everybody's there to listen to the music.
Yeah, I'm open to. There's a few places. Newton Abbott, the Jolly Farmer do one. I think that sounds like a good one to get on. Great. Like I say, the Totnes, that one out in Tavistock. You kind of. I suppose I can trade off between thinking, right, I'm doing a covers gig this weekend. They're usually quite well paid, especially if there's one of you, because... and then that means you can kind of go off and do these other gigs on spec, for nothing, or a beer, just to get your music out there. I mean, I'm probably the worst... For somebody in my position, I do absolutely no social media other than on Facebook on a Monday. Usually I go, I've got these 2 gigs this weekend or whatever, and I might put an event up and invite people. I never actually ever put videos up anymore. I do put tracks up online like on YouTube or on SoundCloud or Bandcamp or occasionally Spotify. But I don't ever actually bother to go onto Facebook and say, come and listen to my stuff. I just think it's there, and if people want to hear it, they can hear it. But I can't. I don't know why. I just can't. I just don't like that idea of going on. I haven't even got an Instagram account or TikTok.
Well, it becomes a little game, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm aware of it being a game of if you're trying to get gigs. It's often you can be judged if you're not careful on how many followers you have on Facebook and Instagram. And we're on Instagram. We've got a lot of followers, but I don't think majority of those don't actually really follow us. It's almost like you've got bands who like bands, so that they'll like each other and get your numbers up, and it just becomes a very strange game in the end, really.
Yeah, it's all a bit, to me, that's probably a bit cynical around it, really, but it's all a bit like, I'm a bit owed for all that attention seeking. Come and listen to my track. That's why I wrote a song called Don't Play This Song to Anybody Else. It was kind of, because the first thing people say is, please like and share and subscribe or whatever, don't they? And it's like, oh, I'm going to put the song up and just say, just don't play it to anybody. Just, it's actually, it wasn't really about that. It was more about this romantic notion that if you wrote a song for somebody and only let them hear it, then that, it was sort of like a romantic thing to do. But also there was that kind of double-edged thing of thinking, actually, that goes against what everybody says these days, which is, please share this around. It's like, no, don't, just play it. Just have it, and nobody else can,
You can spend hours sharing it all around. It makes no difference either. It's kind of, right, there's so many things on all these places telling you to do this and do that, and it doesn't really make any difference.
The internet's supposed to have, like, democratized kind of stuff like that, but consequently, there's just like millions and millions of, I don't know how much stuff gets uploaded to Spotify, YouTube, Bandcamp every day, but trying to cut through all that, if you're not totally on your socials, it's like, you're just never going to make any impact on it.
Do you have people that come to your gigs regularly? I mean, that's a bit of a holy grail. I don't really have many of those, a few of them, but
I do. I know a lot of people. I mean, it's not a lot of people, but the handfuls of people that tend to know about it, it's actually quite often through my Lemon Rock. Lemon Rock? Do you do Lemon Rock?
I don't do Lemon Rock, no.
Yeah, Lemon Rock's all right, because if it can't be... I mean, I used to build websites and stuff, but I can't be bothered with any of that anymore. Lemon Rock's quite good, because you can just kind of put your gigs up there, and then it get emailed out to however many people who subscribe to Lemon Rock who want gig listings in that area. So I get a weekly email from Lemon Rock telling me about all the gigs, which is where Steve, who does the radio show, he does his gig listings from Lemon Rock, I'm sure of it. Right. It's worth doing. It's about £40 a year. You can get you get 3 videos up there, you can put some MP3s up there, you can put some photographs up, you put a biog up. So it's basically a website with like lemonrock.com/Rob C. There you go. That's my bit of social media kind of.
It's out there. Yeah. It's out there. Get it while you can.
And all my links are on there to like YouTube. And quite often people say to me, what's normally the case is when they go, oh, you were advertised to play Lemon Rock and you didn't play on Lemon Rock, you didn't turn up or something. Oh, right, people do actually look at Lemon Rock. So
that's good to know.
It's quite old school Lemon Rock, but actually it's quite an entirely kind of interface on the website. It's all like one page really, where you can just, it's all I need is a kind of internet presence, I think. So you do, things like that. Because they do a mail shot so on a Monday morning, you'll get an email from Lemon Rock saying these are all the gigs that are happening within whatever range of 20 miles is what I select probably. So and this week it'll be I'm down in Lou and I'm where am I playing? I've got a party on Friday, so that's not advertised on there. But yeah, so people do pick it up from that, I think, because actually, I mean, Facebook is that's the only kind of proper social media I do, but I'm not a massive fan of it, obviously, and. But I have got a C-Force group, so when I've got do an event, I can invite about 500 people, and if 20 of them come along to the event. That's
the result, isn't it?
Yeah. So and you hope you kind of certain places you play, like the Fortescue and the Millbridge, you play in Plymouth, you tend to pick up crowds from playing there, and then they'll come down because they'll be on the board outside them. Outside the Millbridge or up on the wall in the Fortescue. You think,
people know your name,
so they'll come along to that, and I've been doing it a bit like yourself, Nigel. I've been doing it quite a long time. So you hope you'd accumulate at least some sort of group of people that are interested in coming to see what you do. But obviously, like if you're a songwriter, you've got to keep writing songs, haven't you?
I think so. It's a shame because we're kind of probably nearly out of time because I can talk for hours really, and I really enjoy these guys. But I was really keen to, and maybe for 5 minutes, I was curious about your because when I first came down to Plymouth, which is kind of worryingly about 30 years ago, you were involved in running the Plymouth Musicians Co-operative.
Yeah.
And I'm still, we're going in November to do some recording
With Doc.
again, and I always go there because it's a great
Doc's
organisation.
brilliant, isn't it?
But it's kind of, I mean, as I say, we've probably only got 5 minutes, but I was curious to know how you got involved in that,
Well,
and what it was, and because people might not know what that was.
That was a direct result. Getting involved in that was really a direct result of being frustrated and not having anywhere to play your own music. So when I say it was better back in the 80s, it probably wasn't. So what happened is I was working at the Arts Centre and somebody, I think Janie, who worked there with me, she said, there's these people who are trying to get a musicians cooperative together. So I went to the cooperative development agency, which is up near the railway station in Plymouth.
Right.
And there's a guy called Chaz Shaw who ran the CDA, the development agency, and he was sort of allowing that building to be used for these kind of really early meetings. Right. And I met a guy who's still a very good friend of mine, Steve Mason. And Steve's it's kind of a folky these days, but he was kind of playing in a kind of punk band back then, pretty much. And so we kind of had this meeting, and me and Steve lived fairly close to each other. I think I was living in Lipson Road, and Steve was living over like Salisbury Road or something like that. So we walked home together after the first meeting and kind of thought, we could do something with this because it would be really good to sort of just try to open up some avenues where bands who would do their own music can play. Because the pubs back then with the Good Companions, the Swan, the Art Roll, the Breakwater, they were fairly open to have it. Like particularly Breakwater would have, bands like the Bricks who were doing their own stuff. Quite a lot of bands. Goodies probably more of a, but even then, like Dave Behenna played there night after night. He did a lot of their own.
Cooperage as well.
This is probably pre-Cooperage.
Okay.
Because Cooperage didn't really get going for. The Cooperage was there, but it was a restaurant, wasn't it? Right. It didn't really get going for bands probably until sometime between when I left Plymouth in 1988 and when I came back in 1993. The Cooperage became the venue to play. Because when I put the Shag Off together, the first gig we did was in the Cooperage, I think. Well, it was actually at a party, my 30th birthday party, but the first public gig. So, but yeah, going back to PMC, so we kind of, a few people got together and we kind of formed this musicians cooperative, and then we put a magazine together called The Pump, which we used to do at the Resource Centre, Virginia House. People know Plymouth. People who don't know Plymouth are going to not get a lot of these references, but people who do know Plymouth would. And one of the key people actually involved in that, and if anybody from Plymouth would know this name, was Tudor Evans. A lot of people at this point would be throwing stuff probably at their screen or whatever. But Tudor's a mate of mine, and I don't mind admitting that. And he helped us to really get the musicians cooperative off the ground. He understood the idea that if we had a magazine that would kind of act as like your manifesto for what you wanted to do. So funny enough, I dug out all the early magazines about a week or two ago because Claire Robinson, who was a journalist on the Plymouth Evening Herald back then, and she's doing a book about the 80s. So I dug all this stuff out and I've found these early pump magazines, and it's quite interesting. We're stating what we want to do. We want to give opportunities to bands who are doing their own stuff. We're going to do this magazine, and we started promoting gigs at the Academy, which became the Dance Academy. In between when it was the Palace Theatre, and then it sort of shut down, and then it became the Academy, and that was a brilliant venue. We did lots. Monday nights we used to put on gigs there, and there would be like, we did one Monday night in December in 1987. This is fresh in my mind because I was looking at it the other day, digging all these magazines out, and there were 1,000 people at that event, and there was like bands doing, bands doing their own stuff, and there wasn't any big covers band kind of. You think you'd never get that many people these days doing a gig like that. And then subsequently we carried on doing gigs like once a month, like PMC kind of benefit gigs. And we'd always try to focus. We'd have a covers band, we weren't like Stalinist about it, where we're not having any cover bands, but we would definitely try to support cover bands, original bands. And so bands, a lot of bands like the Bernhardts, which was like the band that Watershed, Al Shalliker was in the Bernhardts, and then Watershed sort of came out of that. Nick Mee, he was in a band called Reach, they were in the Bernhardts. So, my band that, was Nine of the Neighbours, and it was Billy the Mountain, and then I went off to Bristol after that. But what was great is I came back and like PMC was still going.
Yeah.
And it's still going now. So it's been going for nearly 40 years actually. I think the first, it was about 87 was when we did the first magazines. And the first PMC gig was the Barbican Regatta in 1987. I know this. We put a stage up between the Navy and the building next to it now is called Mint. I think it's like a cafe. There's like a gap there by the Navy, if anybody knows the Navy pub in Plymouth. We had a stage there and a few bands played. My band played Nine and the Neighbours. We had bands like The Switch and Noise Bandits played, a few other bands like that. And that was kind of PMC's first event. And then quite soon after that, really, I went off to Bristol, so I lost track. But then when I came back, you were coming down regularly, with the Mind Oasis kind of.
That's right. Yeah, people. We did a sort of mental health sort of band group, and actually I was also signed up to the agency there for. Do you remember Della? I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah, Della.
She set up an agency there, and I did a couple of gigs through that.
It was very close to folding.
Experience.
Dave Summers, a mate of mine, he kind of got involved with PMC because it was it was on the edge of kind of being wound up, and Dave came in and kind of. I wouldn't say he saved it, but Doc was there. Doc was the kind of continuity factor all the way through all that, and he's still there now in the studio. Yeah. And then Dave and Doc came around my house one night and said, "Do you want to get back involved with PMC?" And I'm like, "Yeah, all right," because I was doing a degree at the time, and I thought I could do a bit of part-time work as well. So, and then we started promoting all these gigs at the Cooperage, mainly. We did other stuff as well, and it was great. It was just like. And we really, really then focused on bands doing their own stuff. Yeah. And then most of those bands were playing, at the time, like, punk, new metal. The night was called Mosh Mania. So that tells you what sort of night it was. And then and it was good because we were like saying to bands like, it's all very well playing to your mates and they're all jumping around and going crazy about it. But, you need to play to people that don't know you, basically. Yeah. So a lot, we kind of encouraged a lot of bands to do that thing. And then we started getting down to big bands, bigger bands. And then we put the Plymouth bands on with them. And these, sort of kids really, like 16, 17, 18, 19. And I think it was kind of like, for a lot of those people, if you ask them, they would probably say that was a key time for them, what went on at the Cooperage, for the PMC gigs particularly. So that, PMC's always had that kind of, it helps all bands, but it's particularly was set up in the first place to help bands who played their own music. Yeah. So that was, kind of a potted history of PMC, I suppose.
Well, it's great, and it's great that it's still going, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use it that much because I don't need to, but I do go back there occasionally. I mean, I was a director there up until a few years ago, and then I kind of gave that up. But I've always got. I haven't got my eye on it, but I'm always happy.
Keep an ear out for it.
Like yourself, you come in and say, we did some recording with Doc, and I was talking to a guy I worked with the other day, and he said, we did some recording. I said, where was that? He said, PMC. I said, great, was Doc there? Yeah, of course Doc's there. He's always there. And it's like, great, They
have rehearsal rooms there as well, don't they? And I think then, it's kind of...
40 years later,
it's great, isn't it? And if people, are musicians and young musicians and they're starting out, it's a good contact to have, isn't it? Good place to drop into even now and just
definitely
find out what's going on. Really.
And it's a place to network as well, And I think it's regenerated itself. It's like Doctor Who, isn't it? PMC. There's a new Doctor kind of every few years. Although but the one. Sorry,
I get it.
Doc is the one.
Well, his studio's a bit like the TARDIS, anyway.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, Doc is the engineer at PMC. For people who don't know, and he's been there sort of forever, really.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
But it does, that's the reassuring, and I think it's kind of in the process of regenerating itself again at the moment, from what I know. So
be good to. I want to do an episode of this at some point around. Or the sort of network that's around Plymouth, and there's a musician zone as well, I think, and there's a few things around, a few initiatives, I think, that I know nothing about.
I don't know if DBS still in Plymouth, is it? I think Music Zone's kind of, I've never heard that was shutting down, but don't quote me on that one. But yeah, there's, I think, to me, the places these days, maybe that's a good place to end up. There's a particularly good scene, it seems, down at the marina on the Barbican.
We've played there a couple of times.
This guy called Cam kind of seems to put on the gigs there. I've met Cam a few times. He seems really switched on with it all. He's really, and they seem to want to, not necessarily totally focus on bands playing their own stuff, but it's an outlet for bands doing that.
I think Kay does some of her promotion stuff there, doesn't she?
Is that Kay Scoble?
Yeah. Was it Carew Productions or Promotions?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do open mic nights there and sort of some session nights when you can play a bit longer. And
I played.
She's coming on one of these as well.
Oh right, I played down there about 18 months ago with George, sax player. It was my first gig. So that was, there's places like that. As far as I kind of, if young people ever say to me, particularly if they're from out of town, there's a guy he saw me play down at the Steel Brew down at the World, and he was going, I want to get into bands, and I said, well, you want to go down the Marina on a Thursday night? I don't know if that's what they still do that now, but they have like a bit like an open mic jam type thing. You can get up and play with each other, and perfect way to kind of, especially if you don't know the scene. And the Junction seems to be pretty good for that sort of thing. They've got a decent new sound system in the Junction as well. And the Nowhere has always been a good place for that, I think, particularly for your kind of punk crowd, which has always been associated with. And the Barbican Theatre's kind of got they're rebels. So you've got like Cat. And obviously Alex Hart, people like that, John Fazell, they all do their own stuff. So there is there's still
around, isn't it?
It's still there.
Keep going with it. It's kind of there, and I'm hoping in some small way that keep this going long enough, and it's going to help add to a bit of this as well.
Maybe we'll get to that kind of critical mass again, where people are. I did gigs, particularly with Shag Off, the band that I had in the 90s. We were doing like all our own stuff. We did one Frank Zappa cover. It's still the same song that I play now. And we played that Heineken Festival to like, I'm not exaggerating, but there was probably about 10,000 people there. And we played Soundwaves on the Hoe, and there was more people than that. And like, you kind of think, there are still bands that there's bands like, I don't know, when those big events happen in Plymouth now, you do get bands doing their own stuff. But you still get bands that tend to, the ones that headline those events do tend to be covers bands, whereas back in the day, 80s, 90s, the headline bands for those events tended to be, I'm actually just thinking about this now, they did tend to be more like original outfits. So that kind of tells you a little bit. I think it tells you about the sort of people that go out to gigs. There's a lot of people who didn't go to gigs for about 20 years because they had, probably about our age, who had kids and families, and then sort of kind of cut themselves off from music a little bit and started going out again, in their kind of late, probably in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. And I think that's why that heritage band thing's got quite big. The whole thing with like, it's the last chance to see you.
Our generation's fault, wasn't it?
I went to Glastonbury a couple of years ago, and I thought, whatever happens, I'm going to go and see McCartney, because I want to go and see McCartney. Yeah. And I would, I'm quite happy to get. Like I said, I went to see Squeeze earlier this year. Great band. I'm not a neophile, as it doesn't have to be new music, but I like, at the same time, it's great when you discover like something new and think, this is,
And at one point in your life, you discovered Squeeze for the first time, and at one point in your life, you discovered the Beatles for the first time. Yeah. There's always a first time, and it's how you recreate that sense of coming across something. For the
all music's new music if you haven't heard it before. It doesn't have to be from this year. If you haven't heard the music before, it's new music to you.
It's one of my corny lines when we're playing gigs and we're doing a new song. I say, for those of you that have seen this before, this is a new song, and for those of you who haven't seen this before, this is a new song.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm kind of I have a little line. It's kind of, well, this is a new one. It's from the 90s. If it's a cover, because all my covers tend to reside back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, I do a little bit of modern stuff, but. You just play what you like, don't you, really?
Well, look, we probably ought to finish, really, because we're probably...
All right, Nigel, it's been great, Trevor.
I really appreciate you coming on, Rob.
Yeah.
And, do check Rob out. And it's very easy to do, because he plays a lot of gigs and he's around a lot, even if he's not so much on social media.
No, but I'm on Facebook. So
he's on Facebook.
Rob C. Force.
Rob C. Force. I will put a link in onto the podcast. And thank you very much. Really
Thanks, Nigel. I've really enjoyed it. And, good luck with all the, with your subsequent podcasts.
We will. Right, I'm going to turn it off.
You never see the thorn, you only see the rose. Never seek to hide, never miss the show. Just sit back and kick back, then hit